Michigan slowly worked their way into the conversation for top team in the country. They're going to have some serious hurdles to overcome, like top team Penn State and returning champs Iowa. They're all Big Ten opponents, so the question for top team might be answered during conferences, but I'd be a fool to say that the winner of Big Tens is for sure the winner of nationals. I mean, just ask Penn State and Ohio State. Michigan Wrestling is for sure building a storyline for themselves if they do somehow pull off a national championship run. They're on their 100th year of wrestling, they have family Michigan traditions throughout their lineup, and nationals is in Detroit, Michigan. It almost sounds like you couldn't make this up if you tried. Michigan still has to go and win matches in Detroit, of course, and throughout this second half of the year, and on top of that, they have to stay healthy. But how and where did they get these big guns to pull off this amount of hype, especially with half the season gone already? Well, that's what I'm here to talk about. Before I start the Michigan lineup breakdown, what's up everyone? My name is Tanner, and this is TrueTan Wrestling. I primarily do lineup breakdowns, major duel and tournament recaps, breaking news stories in the D1 college wrestling space, and a few college retrospectives from time to time. If any of that sounds interesting to you, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button for more D1 wrestling content. If you have any of your own questions throughout this lineup breakdown, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Also follow me on Twitter for wrestling and channel updates, and you can find that link in the video's description. Now, let's talk some Michigan lineup questions. Unlike my Iowa and Penn State videos, everything seems to be on the up for Michigan, and everything seems really straightforward, with the only questions being extremely positive, and most of their major questions have answers already. But before we talk about that, let's talk about Michigan's run last season. Like a ton of teams last season, there were so many questions circling them. Really hurts their team when so many of their wrestlers are training overseas. I'm not saying training overseas is a bad thing, I'm just saying guys are occasionally missing from the lineup. So guys like Michigan were at a few duels for Michigan last year, but they never wrestled, and in Michigan's example, he probably was out because he was preparing his body for 57 kilograms in Tokyo, which is obviously extremely hard for him. They had a promising team though, even with Michigan out of the lineup. They ended up finishing 5th, which was right out of gaining a team trophy, unfortunately. They had 4 All-Americans and 1 finalist in Mason Paris, who would eventually fall to Olympic champ Gable Steveson of Minnesota. The other placers were Cam Amin at 165, who got 2 medical forfeits to take 7th, but he was a freshman, so that was a very good showing. Miles Amin was the 1 seed and Big Ten champ, but ended up taking 3rd at 197. And Logan Massa took 5th after dropping a second round match to a very good Bernie Trox of Cal Poly, but would wrestle all the way back to All-American. The other supporting cast members were Dylan Ragusin at 125, who was clearly too big for the weight, and it is showing with his elite performances so far at 133 this season. He was good at the weight, don't get me wrong, but he just slowly started to underperform as the season got longer. Medley at 133 was the complete opposite, with him being too small for the weight, but he was clearly the best option, but after going 0-2 at Big Tens, he did not qualify. Drew Madden was a 25 seed at 141 pounds, and he only earned the Wolverines half a point, going 1-2, losing to 2 Big Ten wrestlers, but he had a semi-productive season still. Storr at 149 always shows signs of greatness, but he would go 2-2 at Nationals as the 11th seed, which isn't the worst, and I guess he did his job in a way, but I'm still waiting for him to have his breakout performance. Willowan did the same, going 2-2 at Nationals at 157 pounds, but his ceiling is still very high considering he was a very high recruit for the Wolverines, and technically his career is still relatively young, so I'm not giving up on Willowan. And finally, they did not qualify the 184 pound weight class, even with Embry on the bench, who has been a known starter for them, but he might have been out due to COVID protocols, but Bullock appeared to be the guy all season, but he wasn't productive enough to qualify the 184 spot. Clearly Michigan had their stars, their underperformers, and their middle-of-the-road performers. But their supporting cast was helpful, but not helpful enough for Michigan to take home a trophy. With that said, 5th place is pretty good still for a team of this caliber, especially with a 1 seed losing in the semis and only having 1 finalist. I highlight their supporting cast because Michigan is going to need their heavy hitters and their supporting cast to show up if Michigan wants to even sniff the 1st place trophy in March. And so many things have to go right for Michigan, along with a few things going wrong for some of those other teams like Penn State and Iowa. However, speaking of heavy hitters, let's move right into our first weight class, 125, where Michigan was already pretty deep, and then they made the addition of Nick Suriano, making that weight even deeper for the Wolverines. Jack Milley was the guy for the first half of the season for Michigan at 125, and he had a great CKLV, giving Glory a super close match, but regardless of that loss, he still had an amazing CKLV. This is probably a good time to mention that most of Michigan's heavy hitters did not wrestle the first half of the season, primarily getting them ready for folk style again, plus a lot of them are pretty old for a college wrestling season, so they need to be a little smarter with their rest and recovery, so I get why they are sitting them out this first half, but it would have been awesome to see a team of this level compete all year. With that said, they were still 3-0 in duels without those guys like Suriano, Micic, Massa, Amin, and Paris, so they were doing just fine, which speaks to their depth. But back to Medley. He beat guys like Mancino of Colombia, who was an EIWA finalist, which was a very good ranked win for him. Michigan also has cadet world champ and very high recruit McHenry, who is 5-0 this season with an open tournament win under his belt. McHenry is still a little too small yet, I think, to compete at 125, but it clearly shows depth at 125 for Michigan, and then you just add Nick Suriano on top of all that. The announcement of Nick Suriano leaving Rutgers took wrestling fans for a ride, and everyone was speculating where he was going. He eventually landed on Michigan, which I heard was because him and Michic really enjoy training together. Suriano is a real man of mystery, and well, a returning national champ too. It has been a while since he's wrestled folk style at this weight, but I am pumped to see him, and I hope his first match is against returning runner-up Courtney of Arizona State. 133, we see last year's 141 star Drew Mann back down at a reasonable weight. However, the main starter for now appears to be CKLV champ Dylan Ragusin. Ragusin beat returning All-American Cannon of Northwestern in the CKLV finals, so he seems to have made some serious off-season improvements, and he seems more energized up at a reasonable weight class. Mann only lost to Ragusin and Foley at Michigan State this year, so his productivity is still very high if he's needed at this spot, but Ragusin is obviously the guy for now. 141 star for the first half of the season has been Cole Mann, which shows the family ties within this program. He had a great CKLV tournament, placing 4th, which was awesome for his development. Michic has said to be the guy at 141, and I'm very curious to see him up at this weight. It is no shock that this weight will be one of the deepest weights at Big Tens and in the country. Plus, Michic never wrestled at this weight, but he should not be discredited for that. He's returning 3-time All-American and made the finals at 133, so he is definitely a contender for this year. I just want to see how he truly stacks up at 141. He did just make basically 125 this summer in Tokyo, so I hope his body is up to size by now. 149 is pretty clear cut, with Storr being the guy. He would have to injury default and medical forfeit out of CKLV, so I hope he is healthy, and I hope we see him for most of the season. Michigan really needs him at this weight, and they need him to be productive for sure. He's a 2-time round of 16 guy and a 3-time national qualifier. 149 is a little top heavy for sure, don't get me wrong, but behind the top 2, maybe 3, it is like the Wild West, so with the right placement, he could do very well in an NCAA bracket. 157 has another returning supporting cast member with Will Luan. He had a nice CKLV, outplacing several good guys and taking 4th. He isn't the most offensive wrestler, don't get me wrong, but like I said, his ceiling is extremely high, and definitely don't count him out. I think he can compete with some elite wrestlers at 157, and he only lost a 4-2 overtime match to Teamer of Arizona State last year to knock him out of nationals, which I know Teamer is a weird wrestler to predict for, but this is still a nice close loss for him and very promising for Lujan. 165 sees returning starter and All-American in Cam Amin. His weight class for sure did not get any easier, if anything it got way tougher, but they need Cam to repeat his performance from last year, and it's definitely possible. He isn't ranked in the top 8 currently, which I mean makes sense, but it goes to show you how pivotal it is for him to All-American, because it would be major points made up for them. Bullock is down at 174 this year, and he has not made a start at 174 yet because it has been mailer for the most part in the first half of the year. They are both young and not super productive, but their potential is possible. However, we all know Logan Massa has made his return. I have a whole video talking about it, so go check it out. Massa not returning was massive for Michigan's success, so obviously his return is going to really help them in the long run. He has a history of down performances at nationals, and I chalked that up to him being hurt both of those years, but I think him up at 174 is the healthiest weight for him, and he has looked great so far in his small sample size of matches from the Cleveland State Open. 184 saw a long-time in-and-out starter Embry doing his best to be productive until the return of Miles Amin. Amin is expected to be back the second half, and entering into a college season as an Olympic bronze medalist has to be a major confidence booster. I know freestyle success doesn't always translate to NCAA folk style success and vice versa, but I think Amin is really entering this season with a chip on his shoulder, plus he has shown his folk style success before. He is a 4-time All-American already, and he never made the finals yet. He lost a heartbreaker to AJ Ferrari in the semis at 197 last year, and down at 184 will not be much easier. He'll have to get past returning national champ Brooks and returning All-American Poznansky in his own conference, plus there is also Kakaisen and Gear in the Big 12 that cannot be overlooked at all, and of course there is Trent Hidlay of NC State, who's looked very aggressive and very good for the Wolfpack. Amin used to have battles with Mark Hall and has taken guys of his talents to the wire, so if you think Amin isn't a title contender at 184, you're crazy. 197 is a Princeton transfer and a new addition to the team, Brucky. Brucky just got off surgery and he says he feels better than ever, so I'm glad his recovery went well during his redshirt season, and he's looking very strong and aggressive wrestling this year. He will easily be a productive member for Michigan and a much needed puzzle piece for their run. His best finish was 4th in a very tough 197 bracket, and he's a 3-time national qualifier, with one of those years being the years it got cancelled when Princeton could have pushed for a trophy. He had a tight tight match with the CKLV champ Buchanan of Wyoming, and he would get a minor injury that match, which actually cost him the match. But I just hope he is healthy after he medical forfeited out of CKLV, and he makes his return safely against Arizona State. The first half heavyweight starter was Blake, it appears, who was a little underproductive. He went 0-2 at CKLV, but won a nice sudden victory win over CSU Bakersfield, which was nice for his development. We all know that Paris is slowly making his return, which was a little interesting to me to see him sit this first half of the season. He did make a national team, placing second at World Team Trials and placed third at Olympic Trials, so maybe he was training more freestyle than I thought. He did smoke through a Cleveland State bracket though, so he still has it in folk style, and he is definitely the number 2 guy at this weight so far. Well, this lineup breakdown was a little more straightforward than the other 2 breakdowns, but most of these questions have been answered. Their next duel is in Austin, Texas against the team that beat them out for a trophy last season, and that is Arizona State. All the guys who sat out the first half are expected to make the trip and will wrestle against Arizona State, except maybe Suriano, but that is probably the main guy I want to see wrestle since he will go against returning finalist Courtney. I am sure more questions might arise between both of these teams, but only time will tell, so I'm not going to stress about it. Regardless, I'm excited to see this super elite team go against Arizona State, who will for sure be tested by the Wolverines. It is awesome that this duel is in a neutral site, especially in a place like Austin, Texas, which will be exciting for both teams. You can watch this duel on Flow Wrestling, by the way, on January 3rd at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, I believe. This is just an early test for all the returning high-level guys, and I hope they are all healthy and looking great. To talk trophy talk, Michigan clearly has a team of 10 guys that will all qualify, so if they stay healthy, they will be right in the conversation. They need their supporters to step up though, like Storr, Lujan, and even Cam Amin, honestly. If one of them All-Americans or at least round of 12, those are points that they are not projected to get, so that is a must for Michigan. However, Penn State and Iowa have several finalist threats, which is not good for Michigan, so they need finalists or even champs out of Paris, Miles Amin, Suriano, and maybe Micic. Also, some of Iowa and Penn State's guys need to really underperform, like for example Marinelli not placing again, and Caleb Young seems to be leaving the All-American conversation with a lot of his early season results. Basically, the short answer that I've been saying is that all the Michigan guys need to perform to their ranking plus 2 spots to maybe win it all, which is definitely a possibility for most of them, if not all 10 of them. Plus, they need underperformers from Iowa and Penn State, and on top of that, they just really need to stay healthy, because even though they are a deep team, they took third behind 2 Big Ten teams at CKLV that aren't even on the title conversation, so they really need all 10 along with some Detroit magic to win it all. Well, I hope everyone liked this video. I had a ton of fun talking about this Michigan team, and it's going to be really exciting watching them this second half of the year. And don't get me wrong, I love Penn State, but come on, seeing some Detroit magic and seeing Michigan win it all on their 100th year would be one of the biggest storylines ever in Division I college wrestling, along with being a super impressive way to end the 2022 season. But if you like my thoughts, hit that like button, and if you really enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button too for more content from me. Also, please leave a comment in the comment section below if you have any questions or thoughts of your own on the Michigan lineup. Now, with all that said, take care everybody, and I'll see you in the next one.